Hey y'all, hi. It's time for another episode of New Makeup Hot Takes. So much has been released or announced or posted about since I last filmed one of these. And the last one, it was like slow times. Like there was very little to talk about. So we did some deep dives. This is a total opposite. I was scrolling through Trend Mood 1, the Instagram account that I referenced for these videos. And it was just like, there's too much to even talk about. So I was able to just pick based on instinct the handful of things that I think are of note. And it all feels very juicy because of that. If you're new to my channel or relatively new, then welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. My name is Hannah. I make videos about beauty and fashion, but I try not to promote overspending. So usually when I'm talking about trends or looking at new releases, I'm trying to break down the consumer reaction, the consumer process. So if I'm drawn to something, I'm like, well, what's underlying that urge? Do I really need to give into it right now? And I'm often looking for a reason not to buy something instead of a reason to buy something. If you like it, I hope you'll subscribe. And now let us go ahead and get into the meat of the video. New makeup, hot takes, new makeup, hot takes. As I often do, I'm going in reverse chronological order. So just starting at the very top of the page, the Trend Mood page, which is the newest announcements, and going back through time. The Haus Labs Discovery Kit. Interesting. I mean, it's of note for a couple of reasons. One is that I reviewed shade 000, the pure white shade in this foundation. I actually ended up really liking it, and I've kept it in my collection, which is not usual for me. I review a lot of makeup, but I don't keep everything that I review. I don't even keep everything I like. I just try to keep the best of the best. Quality over quantity over here. But I've kept that Haus Labs foundation. It's a really good mix in. I like the texture a lot. I like the way that it sits on the skin. And it's a good mix in because it's pure white. It brightens things up. However, in my experience, both looking at swatches and models online and swatching like the lightest 10 shades of this foundation in store, it's super saturated with either yellow pigment or peach pigment. None of the shades even come close to like the desaturated pale gray olive of my skin. My impression has been that it's a pretty super saturated shade range all around. So anyone with desaturated skin at any depth, I think, is going to have a hard time finding a match in this foundation. This is all just to say that the idea of a try before you buy a kit where you can pick 3 shades and then you only pay for it if you end up deciding not to buy a full bottle of the foundation, because that's what this system is. Oh, you have to pay for shipping. So you pay for shipping $5.95, you get the 3 samples. So essentially you have to pay $6 in order to try 3 different shades. And then if you decide to buy a full-size bottle, that's all that you would have had to pay. If 21 days pass and you don't purchase the full-size bottle, you have to pay $12 plus tax for the fact that you tried the 3 shades or that you have the 3 deluxe size samples and you haven't bought anything else. So maybe not the most elegant or the most user-friendly system, but also not the most inelegant system that I could think of. And it's an interesting approach. It's an interesting try at helping people find shades in what I think is a shade range, are particularly difficult to decipher and maybe unsuccessful for some people shade range. I guess what I'm trying to say is that based on my experience of all the shade ranges that need a system like this, the Haus Labs one is one of the ones that really needs it the most. So it doesn't necessarily surprise me that they're like, we need to come up with a way for people to actually swatch and try. And in that way, it's a little bit like you did it to yourselves, y'all. Like you did it to yourselves by not making better shades, kind of, when you first made the foundation and then like caused this to be necessary. But of course, at the same time, I feel like they deserve kudos for this kind of innovation. At least they're trying something new. It's interesting. Okay, Fenty. Fenty has always been one of those brands that piques my interest no matter what they're doing. I think partly because at the beginning, the brand was so compelling and came out with so many really special, iconic products that got in amongst me in those early days of passion for makeup and kind of stayed there. And you know, it's a notoriously groundbreaking brand and I think deserves all of the accolades and the affection that it has for that reason. But as the years have gone on, I've found that the releases, that the actual fact of what's being released and my sort of innate affection for the brand have grown apart a little bit. It's like lately everything Fenty releases, I sit up and take notice because it's Fenty and then I'm like, oh, but it's just a little thing, like a little throwaway thing. I feel like they haven't come through with anything hard hitting in a long time. It's just like little one-offs here and there. And this release is no exception. It is a single shade of Icon Velvet Lipstick, Pink Limousine, a vivid hot pink. And I think maybe it's a new formula, creamy whipped texture with intense color, leaves lips feeling plush and comfy, not dry. So this is in the exact same category as like those new Charlotte Tilbury. It's the whipped, what it is a soft matte lip cream coming through in every brand, like an iteration of that in every brand. And we've been seeing it. We've been seeing something like this pop up in every brand, like in every new makeup hot takes. So it looks like Fenty is doing it too. Maybe they already had some and it's just a new color, but it sort of seems like they're debuting the formula with just the one color. So like I was saying, sort of just like a little thing, like no heavy hitters, just one thing, one color. But the reason that I'm talking about this instead of just skipping it for that reason is that this reminds me so much of the exact color of NARS lipstick. I mean, I think it's Scap, that pink NARS lipstick that's called Scap that I had for a long time. But the origin of that color and colors kind of like it in my life is that, gosh, when must it have been? It must have been like 2013 or 14 maybe, because I think there were a couple of years when I had these NARS lipsticks and I wore them dancing tango all the time. And it was before I went to graduate school. And that was in 2014. So it must have been 2012, 13, that kind of general time. One year, and maybe some people know more, there was a J. Crew catalog in which the models were wearing a color like this and like an orange that was like this in intensity and brightness and saturation. And they just looked so amazing. And this was sort of before I got deep into makeup. Like I just wore some signature pieces of makeup and some signature looks just to dance tango, just to go out and dance. I would make myself up to go out every night. But I actually went to the J. Crew and I was like, what are these lipsticks? I went to the salesperson and I was like, do you know what they used? And the salesperson luckily said, I don't know exactly what it is. It's not like they credited the exact lipsticks in the catalog, but what I do know is that they're NARS. And so I was able to take the J. Crew catalog into Sephora and find the exact colors. And Scap was one of them and it looks just like this. I can't remember the other one off the top of my head, although I can't believe that I can't remember it. Past Hannah would be horrified. But for years, this was like my signature lip, this type of thing, and one that looked exactly like this. It's really nostalgic for me. I see this and I'm like, oh yeah, even though a decade has passed, I still feel there's something endlessly editorial, striking, aesthetic, and chic about this as a lip color, especially on an otherwise relatively simple makeup look. It doesn't make me want to run out and get it again. It kind of does a little bit, actually. Part of me wants to run out and do this again. I don't know if I'd have to buy something, though. It might be that I could shop my stash or make a concoction or just use a color that's the closest to something vaguely like this in my collection. It just really dredges up a memory of a feeling, of a makeup moment from my long ago past, and I like that. Again, not a reason to buy it, but a reason to talk about it. Okay, Melt Cosmetics Glazed Skin Sheer Finishing Powder. I am giving a hot take on this for one reason and for one reason alone. It's a matte powder, right? All natural, lightweight, buildable coverage, soft focus finish, blurs, pores, fine lines, and wrinkles, giving a radiant glow for more youthful, fresh-looking skin. This is not a highlighting product in any way, and it doesn't have a glazed finish. It's a soft focus. I think it's that kind of like soft focus pore diffusing thing that makes everything sort of smoothed, and therefore they can use the term radiant in the marketing, but it is not, I don't think. There's no way they'd be claiming it's a soft focus finish that blurs pores if it were illuminating, if it were in any way like glazing. And yet they're calling it glazed skin and they're using donuts in the advertising. It's just classic, right? It's like donuts and the idea of glazed skin are so trendy right now. I do think it's probably a really successful marketing bid, right? To use a donut and to use the term glazed and to use imagery of glazing. I think a lot of brands have chosen to do that. Probably the market research is that it is top of the top of kind of concepts for makeup sales right now. So that's probably why they chose it. And then the thing that they're using that concept to sell is just not glazing. Like it's not glazing makeup. It doesn't make any sense. It's really square peg in a round hole. Like they're trying to stop trying to make glazed happen when you're selling a soft focus pore blurring finishing powder. That's my hot take. The Patrick Ta new blush shades. It's just pretty. I had one of these for a while in She's So LA. Turned out that when I said that I needed a brown blush, I also meant that I needed something that wasn't orange at all. I never really ended up using it. I also didn't really like, now I'm remembering the formula, sort of a balm and a powder. But if I remember correctly, I liked the powder. I just felt that the whole kit and caboodle wasn't really always cracked up to be for me. Like the two things working together didn't really work together the way that I wanted them to. This is all just to say, I had one of these. I ended up decluttering it, both for the formula and I think for the color. But the super blush draped image, She's Wanted, which is one of the 3 new shades, it's so great. It looks great. I'm going to say the same thing again, as I said about the Fenty lip color, Pink Limousine. I know what to do about this feeling. It couldn't be clearer because especially in this case, it's like, I don't want this product. I had one and I don't have it anymore. I didn't keep it. So I know what to do about this feeling. Go into my makeup drawer and find something that I can use to create a look like this. Just wear more blush next time and glossy highlight. You don't need to buy this Patrick Ta blush to get your cheek to look like that. It's going to be so fun to do that because I haven't done that in a long time. And so this imagery is inspiring a desire to wear makeup in a certain way. It doesn't need to inspire a purchase. Okay, Makeup Forever New Concealer. This is making it into New Makeup Hot Takes because way back in the day when what was I doing? I think I had used up my one concealer that was Tarte Shape Tape and decided I wanted to buy something other than Tarte Shape Tape. I think this is what happened. I wanted to find a different concealer that was a little bit more serum-y, lighter, more skin-like. And so I went on a hunt for a concealer that was light enough for me at Sephora, swatching, like in person swatching, and discovered that most shade ranges didn't go light enough for me. This must have been 6 years ago. And at this point, I wasn't even thinking about olive undertone, desaturation, true neutrality. I was really just looking for something that was literally light enough to brighten my skin. And most of the beautiful new concealer formulas on the market, the lightest one was darker than my skin. And so there was just no way to make it work. And then I went to Makeup Forever and I found the Makeup Forever Ultra HD Concealer, which was a pretty new release at the time. And not only did the shade range go incredibly light, but among the lightest shades, there was a choice between like a pinky leaning one, a more yellow leaning one, and a more neutral one. It wasn't even the very lightest one that ended up being the best match for me. I think it was the second lightest one. I used that concealer for a long time and the consistency was absolutely beautiful. If you've watched my early videos, you'll know it because that's what I was using at the time, I think, for some length of time at the beginning of my channel. This looks like a re-release or a new lot, not a re-release, but an update on that because it says it's an addition to the HD Skin family, the HD Skin Concealer. I mean, it might be even replacing that other one. And I just have fond feelings. However, once I actually figured out that I had desaturated gray olive undertones in my complexion, I started finding concealers like the Rose Ink Concealer in LX010 that are desaturated. I was able to see how bright and saturated the Makeup Forever one was. And I was able to start understanding that just having it be light, like just lightness isn't enough, that there's more to it than just light or dark. So I don't have great hopes that there will be a shade like Rose Ink LX010 in this shade range. And for that reason, once again, I am not feeling like, oh, I need to buy it, I need to try it, I can't wait to see it. It'll be interesting to see it in store. Who knows? Maybe they have gotten the memo about saturation as well. But I'm mentioning it again because it pings those sort of old nostalgia bells a little bit in a way that I can stay a bit distant from, in a way that doesn't require me to buy anything. But it pings them nonetheless. Okay, this is just cool colors in this Valentino Liquirosso. Liquirosso 2-in-1 Soft Matte Liquid Lipstick and Blush. That's the other thing that's interesting about this. So Valentino makeup, I don't even know. I don't know her. Like I don't think, tried anything. Is it obscure? Does it not come out that often? Do we not hear that much about it? I don't know. When I first saw it, I was like, oh yeah, Valentino makeup, because I think there's Dior, there's Chanel, there's blah, blah, blah. And then there's Yves Saint Laurent. And then when I thought about it, I was like, yeah, but when have I actually really heard of Valentino makeup? Do they have an iconic product? Am I just forgetting right now? I have no context, basically. I dug into my Makeup Mind Palace and came empty for context on Valentino makeup. But it is interesting that they're releasing a lip and cheek, a soft matte lip and cheek product. It says runway inspired. That totally makes sense to me. It is like that vibe. But it's in this doe, it's a doe foot into a dip tube type of thing rather than being in a compact or something. Usually you see a lip and cheek in a different format. It's not as though it's unheard of, this, but it's just maybe the least common format for a lip and cheek. So that's kind of interesting. But the most interesting thing is the shade range. And And the most interesting shade is Highway to Plum. Although who named that? Seems like they could have workshopped that one a little more. Highway to Plum. But it's just this it's like NARS Pussy Control. That old stick color. It's such a cool color. Stick lip thing that they had, like lip crayon. NARS had a lip crayon in this color, but this even looks grungier than that. Gosh, the model, like the pictures the model's wearing it are really beautiful, especially when you can see that it's on lip and cheek. Highway to Plum. They really went there. And they know it too, because on the slide, there's only 2 or 3 colors that the models are modeling. And this one is the most heavily featured. I feel like they know it's kind of the attention grabber of the range. But there's some other really beautiful ones. There's some deep nudes, 3 or 4 different ones that are really pretty. There's a bright pink that's very much like that Fenty thing. And I bet the way that this goes onto the lips is very similar to this sort of soft matte lip cream that's everywhere right now. There's an orange. Yeah, I respect it. I see it and I respect it. I feel like they made some good choices in terms of colors, balance, the formula, the packaging, all of that stuff. They made some good choices. $40. So even as someone with a budget for reviewing makeup, it feels a little steep. It doesn't really make me want to do it. It's like maybe if we get to the end of the month and I haven't spent my whole review budget and I'm placing an order from a shop that carries this and I have $40 left over, like maybe I will get Highway to Plum and talk about it, like try it and talk about it. But I'm not going to place an order just for it because I'd rather just like appreciate what they've done. It's probably great. That's the thing. I feel like I don't necessarily need to try it to find out. Like you can tell the color's really cool. You can tell the execution is good. It's very beautiful. The packaging's probably luxe. It's not the kind of thing that's begging for a review. It's just begging to be talked about new makeup hot takes. Okay, just briefly, this is kind of like an of note thing just for people who've been around here for a long time. Glossier, who I haven't reviewed in a while, but I used to do a lot of reviews of. They used to have, to me, the greatest lip product ever created. It was the Vanillic Lip, which was really, Vanillic Lip was a bad term for it. It was really just like a semi-sheer, only semi-shiny, very wearable kind of demi-matte gloss sort of thing that was really nourishing, easy to wear, and smelled really good and came in beautiful colors. I can't believe they discontinued it. It was perfect. And the color that I absolutely loved in it was Pony. Pony in the Vanillic Lip. Greatest lip product of all time. It was so good. Anyway, they discontinued the butt out of it. Then they came out with the Ultralip, which is like super shiny. Like this is the product that should have been called Vanillic Lip. They got everything scrambled over at Glossier. This is a nice product. It's nice. I'm not usually the biggest fan of highly pigmented, super shiny, slidey things. I find them harder to wear. The thing about the Vanillic Lip is that it was so easy to wear. Always enhanced the lips and always looked flawless and never was a mess. Ultralip is sometimes kind of a mess. And when it launched, I think I remember the palest shade, the really, really pale shade that kind of washed out my lips. I remember really liking that. I wore that a lot when I first got it, but there wasn't a really good grungy color like Pony. Well, look what they've done. They've literally released Pony, the same color in this formula, which is fine. It's better than not having it. I still pine for the old Vanillic Lip formula, but I had to mention it. I couldn't not mention that the Ultralip now comes in Pony. What a gas. Oh, this is the thing I'm the most excited to talk about because I'm just interested in marketing, like the way things are marketed, aesthetics, slays, serves, unexpected things. Look at this. Look at the photography for this Chanel fall collection. Chanel Equinox de Chanel. So there are these eyeshadow powders, which is kind of interesting. There are blushes, really interesting looking blushes. And there are these lip products and nail polishes. The marketing, it's 90s. It's also kind of 70s with the colors. It's graphic. It almost looks like they took a leaf out of Isamaya's book. And they took a really good long look at this kind of flash photography, saturated, grainy Instagram photography aesthetic. And they just leaned into it, almost like they reverse engineered the collection, like the colors from that kind of aesthetic. It's so cohesive. Like they knew exactly how they were going to market it, what it was going to look like. I love it when high-end, like inaccessibly expensive brands do this sort of grunge, accessible grunge thing. There's something so satisfying and tempting about it. I don't know if I would ever buy like one of these. This is the thing. It doesn't necessarily make me want to buy it. I love that. It makes me want to give a standing ovation to someone, the artistic director behind this campaign. That's what it makes me want to do. And I would so much rather appreciate makeup from that place than from a place of like desperately needing to always keep buying more, needing to own a piece of the collection because I think it's so smart. I mean, I wouldn't say no to either of these blushes, probably. The eyeshadow powders are intriguing. The lip colors are all of them very beautiful. And, you know, I could see myself seeing it in store in the fall and being like, oh, yeah, one or two of these would suit me. But that's just not the point. The point is look at it. So I was already going to talk about this, and then later down on Trend Mood, I came across another almost equally as sharp release from Chanel, but with a totally different aesthetic. So this is a makeup brush set and a mirror. So it's like tools, makeup tools rather than makeup. Interesting to see that from Chanel, but look at it. Like these beautiful, minimal, but brightly colored, like candy colored, juicy, covetable, glossy, pastel lavender, glossy lipstick pink, like matched sets. It's just so aesthetic, but in a totally different way. And it's the same thing. It's like round of applause to whoever conceived of this. It's so fresh. It's so fresh for a brand like Chanel. It's like they had some really successful meetings, marketing meetings, and got some visionaries on staff. And they were like, we want to branch out into a little bit trendier, a little bit fresher feeling of a space. Let's pick a couple of different aesthetic directions and let's go in one of those directions with this makeup brush set mirror thing. Let's go in another one of those directions with the fall collection. And then they were like, all right, break. And they did it and they absolutely served. The Kevyn Aucoin lighting stick looks really pretty. I really love this kind of thing right now, but it looks a lot like the Surratt one that I'm super into that I'm actually wearing today. I think that that's part of why it really, really looks like the Merit ones. So it's funny, having tried these other ones, even though it's like my favorite format for a highlighter right now. I think that's why it stands out. But I see it and I'm like, oh, looks like other ones that I own, or looks like other ones that I've already tried. I don't need to try it. I'm just like, oh, good move, but I can already do what this would do with stuff I have. So it's fine. Okay, a new Natasha Denona mini eyeshadow palette. It's mauves. It doesn't really grip me. It's these, well, it grips me because it's grungy in its way, but it's like a very, very pale version of grungy. It grips me because it's desaturated. That's what it is. It grips me because it's desaturated. I actually like it. I feel like, especially because it's also very pale and I'm very pale, so it's striking me as very wearable for somebody with my skin. And not all the Natasha Denona minis are like that. A lot of them, because they're only the 5 shades, it's like they're all gonna really pack a punch on someone as pale as I am. And so it's interesting to see one come out that potentially offers subtlety. Of course, that means that it might not work for everyone because it might be too pale. I mean, we'll see when people start actually trying it out. It will just depend on the way that the shadows register on skin. But the actual reason I threw this into New Makeup Hot Takes is because of that second shade from the left, which is, I guess, Galaxia, Shimmering Rosé Champagne. It's hard to be sure, but it really looks like it might be that really sheer wet look shiny formula from Natasha Denona that I love so much. It might also just be a regular metallic. I'm very curious. I'm going to try to find out, hopefully by swatching this in store, not by buying it. But Kava and Sparks from the Gold palette were in this amazing, super wet looking formula that I feel like we haven't seen before since from Natasha Denona. Wouldn't it be interesting if it just like showed up in this mini palette? Overall, this attracts me though, probably because I'm into more subtle eye makeup right now. I don't love pink and purple, but it seems like it might be soft enough and desaturated enough not to necessarily always read like that. Okay, briefly addressing the Isamaya palette because some of you have DM'd me about it. I reviewed Isamaya Beauty when it first launched. I mean, it wasn't when it first launched. As always, I was like really late to the game. Basically, long after it first launched, I bought most of the things from the collection and filmed a very thorough review, and I was really disappointed specifically by the eyeshadows. There was one thing from that collection that I loved, and that was the Black Veil gloss. So the new collection has 2 new colors in that gloss, and I think it's a great gloss. However, to me, one of the most compelling things about it is the color, and neither this peachy orange nor this like blackish gray looks better to me than the original Black Veil gloss. Like, I'm really happy with the one that I have, and that's fine. What I've been hearing from some of you is that the eyeshadow formula is different and that people are really loving the eyeshadow formula in this new palette. People are like, Hannah, we really want you to review it because it's different than the other one. I'm just scrolling through the pictures. Here's the thing. If I were a more dramatic, hyperbolic person, I would say the following sentence. I hate the color story. However, I try not to say I hate things. It's not really like that. Hate's a strong word. What I will say is that my gut rejects. I viscerally am repulsed by. I find this color story uncohesive and uncompelling. I always try to see the perspective of the person who put the thing together. You know, a lot of times the issue with color stories is that they're super boring. This does not have that issue. And a lot of times I see super boring color stories and they're like, oh, well, they were just trying to make something wearable. They were just doing what they like. They don't have a vision. It's fine. But with this, it's like half of the colors are amazing dream colors for me. A third of them are grungy, bronzy golds, just like the other palette. Individual colors in there are perfect colors for me. But then the shades of red, orange, green, blue, purple, and pink that Isamaya has chosen to infiltrate those other grungy colors, it just doesn't sing for me. There's just something about it. I think the shades themselves, maybe there's too much color, like too many different colors, but they're all sort of at the same register of grunge, except some of them aren't, and it just feels unbalanced to me. I'm sorry that I'm not being more articulate about it right now, but I think that that's what it is. I think that there's too much cool and warm mixed together. Like if you took out the two blues, the almost teal bright blue and the sort of soft grungy periwinkle, if you took out those two blues, it would feel much more cohesive to me. And that's still having greens and reds and oranges all mixed together. There's still some warm and some cool. I just feel like there's one too many colors, literal tones, and it just looks like a mess. And I felt that way about the first one too, even though it was actually the formula that ended up disappointing me. Because the reality is when you wear eyeshadow like this, you're just choosing an edit of them. So it's not as though the fact that the color story in the palette looks bad to me means that all the eye looks would look bad. I actually think that if I liked these formulas, I could make some really great eye looks with this palette. So it's not necessarily a reason to reject it whole cloth. It's just, it doesn't make me want to buy it. None of these things from Isamaya makes me want to buy them. So although I have faint academic interest in whether the formula has actually changed as much as some people say that it has, because I disliked the first one so much, it's not a strong enough interest for me to want to buy this, even for review. And lastly, Westman Atelier, coming through as always with something that makes me want to buy it, even though it's rabidly expensive. Liquid, super loaded, all over Illuminator drops with vitamin C. It's just the kind of thing that I love. And here's what I always do with Westman Atelier. My knee-jerk reaction is, no, I'm not buying that because it's too expensive. And I just wait. And then what has felt like an urgent desire to buy the thing ever since I found out about it eventually fades, usually faster than I think it's going to, because I kind of get my head wrapped around it and it's like, oh, it's just another liquid illuminator and I have plenty of them. Obviously, I'll be curious to see what people say about this. It's going to be at Sephora, so maybe I'll get to watch it in store at some point. The other thing that's being shown here is that they've released another shade, a deeper shade of their bronzer, which is fantastic. A deep, rich brown. It looks beautiful. So I just like it. I like Westman Atelier. I like the products that I've ever tried. You know, it's prohibitively expensive for most people. Always gives me pause for that reason. But I feel like they chose well with what they decided to do this time around for this release. And it always interests me enough that it makes me want to bring it up in New Makeup Hot Takes, even if I'm not planning to buy it. That is it. That is not, by any stretch of the imagination, everything that's been released in makeup in the past few weeks. It's just the stuff that I felt like I had something to say about. You know, I like to add to the conversation rather than just stating the obvious. And for a lot of what's new out here in makeup, there's nothing to state. There's nothing to state but the obvious, like Barbie makeup. Of course, makeup brands are doing Barbie stuff. It's obvious. Sephora sets, once again, I talk about them every time and how nobody needs a bunch of tiny little dinky things. It's obvious. So I hope it was enough. I hope you enjoyed your time here with me discussing new makeup. Again, if you're not subscribed and you think you're going to watch some more videos, go ahead and subscribe. I'll really appreciate it. Thank you also to those of you who are always liking and commenting. But no matter what you're up to, I hope you're taking extra good care of yourself so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.